Hi, this is Karen White of Divine Time Astrology, and I'm here with Channing Ayers of Asheville Vedic Astrology. And today you will learn how your relationship capacity, as seen in the birth chart, can rapidly improve through the application of attachment theory. Even if you have not yet taken the attachment quiz at yourpersonality.com, you will still learn a lot about relationship capacity today, because Channing and I will be analyzing birth charts. I've only been reading about attachment styles for a few weeks now, and I'm already seeing an amazing improvement in how I'm handling my anxious feelings with my husband. Those of you who sent me your birth data, we're going to be talking about your chart, and you'll know it's you because I'll use your first name.
Something I wanted to put out there that's important that I've been, understanding more and more of is that none of these attachment styles are wrong. None of them are bad. None of them means there's something wrong with you. This is more for the sake of understanding. This is more for the sake of understanding how you may be wired and how this may affect your relationships, and how becoming conscious of certain things may help guide and direct each person towards becoming more aware of things that, like habits or things that we've picked up unconsciously, or just why we feel the way we do sometimes. And when these things can get triggered in relationships pretty easily. And so this is information. It's not a label. It's not judgment. It's not this is bad or that's bad if this person is like this. There can be some more challenges with some of these types of attachment styles, in the sense, especially if we don't understand them. If we don't have as many tools. So I kind of wanted to make sure that we had expressed that when we were talking about these things.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Also, it can change. This changes as you know, as you grow and you do better when you know better. And so you can take the test again on yourpersonality.net and again and again to see how things are going. And, I can just share a short thing that happened recently with my husband. And the process was so interesting. It was a small thing. And it's always the small things, isn't it? Anyway, he got into bed and I was still getting ready for bed. And normally when I sit down and he's in bed already, we talk, we just chat with each other. But he was reading a book. So I kept asking him questions, just to talk to him, because I wanted that before bed, final conversation kind of thing, just connect before bed, because we spent hours apart during the day. And it seemed like he just kept going back to his book, right? Well, here's what I figured out. I didn't know, I wasn't fully aware at first what it was I was feeling. Mm-hmm. But what I did was I started getting upset. I started getting mad, right? Mm-hmm. And then he's like, what's going on? and he was, he's so sweet, I swear, but he didn't get upset. He was just like, what's going on with you? And it took me a little bit of time, but then I got clear. It was like, what? I'm feeling disconnected and not dismissed exactly and not ignored exactly, but something along those lines. And then once that became clear, everything else fell into place. But it happened so much more quickly, because I was laying there and I'm thinking, okay, what is going on with you right now? And I'm trying to think about the books and think about the information that we've been talking about. And the one book that I'm reading, Hold Me Close, I believe it's called, she talks about these little problems that arise in a relationship, and it's always about connection or lack of or loss of connection. And so what it was, I was doing this protest behavior, right? That's what they call it, protest behavior. And underneath protest behavior is always the desire for connection. And so I was able to get to it a lot more quickly. And, oh, so that's what was going on. I just really wanted to connect with you and talk for a few minutes before we go to sleep. And I was feeling ignored by you, that you didn't want to or something.
Well, it's interesting because what you are describing, the process that you're describing, is something that I've been studying pretty in depth over the past 2 years through what's called nonviolent communication. It's a whole learning process of how to identify what our feelings are, and then how to connect those feelings with what the needs are going on. And it's a two-way process. It's also really heavy on the empathy aspect of trying to understand what another person's needs are and trying to understand what the other person is feeling. And so when you find someone who is more likely towards a secure be able to tap into that empathetic aspect more, to try to say, hey, I don't understand what's going on with you. Why don't you tell me what's going on with you? Because that would mean that they weren't going into their primitive mode of just going into fear and making things mean something else, and just actually curious about, well, what's really going on with this person. And that would be a way towards approaching things when you start getting triggered, is really going into how you're actually feeling. And I love the nonviolent communication, which I may refer to from now on as NVC. I don't know if the name is the best description of it, because it makes you think you might not need it if you're not communicating violently. And that is true. None of us are really necessarily trying to communicate violently, but our culture, our languaging, certain ways that we've been raised, even with the best intentions, set us up for this kind of triggered response a lot of times. And we're not.
I have to admit too that for myself, that's what I tend to do. I tend to skip over the hurt, or skip over that weak feeling, right, and go to anger. That's my typical thing.
Yeah.
And, but we were able to interrupt it a lot more quickly.
Yeah.
And it had a huge part of that was his response. Because if he had responded with anger, then it would have been much more difficult. But he didn't. And I think maybe part of it is because we've been reading this, and part of it because he has more of the secure attachment style. It's a combination of things. And, it was like an opportunity, and I'm thinking, okay, all this stuff that I've been learning, how am I really feeling? And in this book, this Hold Me Tight, what she talks about is she gives examples of exchanges like that, and then what was really going on, and then expressing the true feeling, the truth, expressing the truth.
Yeah. And
I like the way she put that, because then you start talking about how you're feeling, and then you find out, well, wait a minute, that's not the real feeling. There's another one underneath that one. And then there might be another one underneath that one. And you have to get to that one. And your partner almost always responds positively to the real one.
Because we're authentic and making ourselves vulnerable. And we're not blaming the other person necessarily for what it is that's going on with us. And those are really key aspects towards creating intimacy and a connection, is the vulnerability. The ability to be vulnerable with your true feelings is a process that we're all learning. And that's how it links to astrology, because we can see in astrology when we have aspects that are affecting the moon or the sun, we may not really feel like being vulnerable sometimes. We may not naturally lean towards that. And that might be something to bring more up into the consciousness of how to work on our inner confidence or our inner security in a way that allows us to be more vulnerable. Because in my experience is that people do really respond well to vulnerability because it's real.
It's real.
It's real. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And speaking of astrology, I have Mars aspecting my moon to a large degree, and K2. And K2 means that it's not easy for me to immediately know what I'm feeling, like the real one. Like I feel my feelings, but I don't always get to the real one right away.
Yeah.
And then Saturn is there too, which of course is the negative interpretation, right? What's the worst possible interpretation of what's going on right now? And then that is, so that's how the astrology can come into it. Luckily, there's Jupiter though. And in this case, Jupiter happened to be my husband, which for a woman, Jupiter represents the husband. So, and the natural ruler of husband. Yeah. So I got lucky. But no, what I'm saying is that you can work your way through it. There are ways to do it. There are scripts you can learn. If at first it's too hard to be vulnerable, you fake it till you make it, that idea, you know?
Yeah.
It's better when you understand what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's what I love about the nonviolent communication, because they give you a lot of tools and scripts and practice. And it's a great book. It's by Marshall Rosenberg. If anyone wants to check it out, I recommend it to a lot of my clients because it helps with so many different areas of life. It helps with so many different planets. I can see how it helps with Mercury. It helps with the moon. It helps with the sun. It helps with Saturn. It helps with all of the planets and in so many different ways. And just that aspect of truth and vulnerability and authentic communication and being able to listen to what other people are saying without responding strongly in an emotional sense, be able to communicate. And this is one of the tools that I've found, which I think can help people develop more of a secure attached style, because if we're, if that's our goal in relationship.
Maybe we can talk about that some more at some point,
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. This is Wendy.
Okay. And I just want to let everyone know I haven't seen these charts yet. So we're totally, this is an experiment. This is a research project. So we're just beginning to dive into what this might look like in a chart.
Yeah, some of these charts are people I've never worked with. So, and this one's a person I've never worked with either. So I don't really know her circumstances or anything.
So is this a person that maybe took the test already?
Let me see. No, she didn't.
Okay. All right.
We've got Moon, Mars, Rahu.
Moon, Mars, Rahu, with Mars in Aries ruling its own home and Rahu with its ruler, Mars.
Yes. So quite a strong Mars.
Mm-hmm. And this is going on in the fifth house.
In the fifth, which is a nice house. It's a good house for the moon. What I usually do is I go right to the moon. First I look at the moon. Is that what you do?
Yeah, I look at the moon, and I'm looking at the moon combined with Mars, which is really strong in this chart, but it's also a malefic. And I also can speak from experience that a lot of times when I see Mars in the fifth house, that gives a person a really strong opinion about things.
Yeah, and with the moon too.
With the moon, right?
Which brings up another source of a great communication skill and just a way to work with the Moon-Mars situation, and that is the work of Byron Katie. If you've heard of her. Byron, everybody calls her Katie though. And you can find her on YouTube. Put in Byron Katie and watch her work with people, and she teaches this 4-step process. Very simple, but not always easy, but nevertheless it's simple. And she gives many, many, many demonstrations of it. And every time I have a client who has the moon and Mars that strong together, I always recommend Byron Katie's work.
And that moon is with Rahu too. So it's not just with Mars, it's with Rahu. So anything going on with the moon, Byron Katie's good for, because she's working with helping us change our perspectives, helping us change how we're seeing a situation. And the Byron Katie could be helping with with just how this person might be seeing things, so their perspective on things. Mm-hmm.
Well, her Karaka is Venus.
Yeah.
And that's in the ascendant, and it's with Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
But it's aspected by Jupiter and Mercury, a nice Jupiter. But Saturn with Venus is not an easy combination at all. And over here in the Navamsha, she has it with the moon, and then aspected by Saturn and Mars.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's interesting too, because I have been looking at charts as far as what they might present as attachment styles with some of my clients and some of the people I work with. And a lot of people I work with actually have Saturn and Venus combinations. And so the Saturn-Venus combination is an interesting one, because that one tends to ask the person in this lifetime to be really working on their self-worth and their self-value, and how they connect with that feeling of total acceptance and love within themselves before they really sense it on the external level. This is a real internal process, and you can see there's karma with something when Saturn's involved with it. With everything in the chart, it's connected to something, but when Saturn's there, Saturn's showing us where the heavy work is going to be. And this is happening in the first house for this person. So their job in this lifetime is going to be about really overcoming any blocks to their own self-worth, self-love, and self-acceptance.
And Saturn is the second house lord and the third house lord, but she could be a teacher. And teaching is one of the ways that we grow.
Yeah.
And we learn an awful lot about ourselves when we teach something that we thought we knew really well. And then we find out that we get to learn it on another level. So since this is her Karaka and Saturn, the second house lord of self-worth, there is like, she's got this nice Jupiter to help her out too.
That Jupiter is definitely lending. It's taking care of the fourth house and the first house too. It's nice when you have a planet that's Rashi aspecting its own home. So even if that planet, even if there's stress in the first house with that Venus and Saturn, that Jupiter is there taking care of this person, taking care of their health, taking care of their emotional well-being.
Right.
So that does look.
Now this Mercury is in Pisces, and this is not his best sign, because Mercury handles the details of life, and Pisces is not the details, it's the big picture. But this can also maybe bring some boundary issues in relationships. And so, learning how to set boundaries, how to respect other people's boundaries, that can be part of the path of learning to, be a good partner, and to also get a good partner. See, because look at the Darakaraka here, the spouse producer planet is Mercury.
This might bring some delays to this person, because Saturn's involved by Rashi aspecting it as well. So Saturn tends to slow things down and show that there might be some restrictions. And Mercury, being the Darakaraka and also being the seventh house lord, is the partner. So one of the things that this person might be experiencing is that the partner themselves, even though it's external and it's coming to this person from an external source, this is still what their frequency is attracting into their lives. So their partner themselves may really be needing to work on and develop their mercurial skills in this lifetime. They may be too young or too immature, or not knowing how to communicate always, and have to work on that in their lives.
So with that, the way that looks is that it has to do with the difference between you and me. Even though we're all one, with Mercury we have to distinguish between things, like this is this, but it's not that. And so boundaries in relationships is a huge thing. And Jupiter there, whatever Jupiter is, Jupiter helps. He helps. So he's going to be helping you with that a lot. But then I keep coming back to this. I think we should talk a little bit more about this Mars with the moon.
Mm-hmm.
How that can, the thing that I notice that I'll say first is because I tell this to any of my clients who have this, and that is in relationship, when you have Mars with the moon, the one thing that you have to be careful not to do is to give advice to people who haven't asked for it. And that could be anybody, but especially because this is a woman, but especially to a male partner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they don't experience it the way that you do. Your motivation is completely different than how they receive it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they receive it as something disrespectful, because you're sounding more like mom, and you're saying, oh, here, you can't figure it out yourself, let me do it for you, here's what you can do to make your life better. And that's not a bad thing by itself. It's only bad when you're doing it without permission.
Mm-hmm.
And Mars has to do these things. Mars has to fix things and improve things and kill evils.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a big distinction between when and how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can talk about that now.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Mars and the moon together can really make a person feel emotional really quickly too. It can bring a lot of things up to the surface really quickly. This can also be impacting their nervous system, so that they're more energy going on through their body. So they would want to take time to meditate more, to calm their nervous system down, just to make sure that this stays in balance. It's a good Mars. It's in a good sign, but there is still Rahu there. So wherever Rahu is, really throws a wrench into how this person is going to experience this. This person is learning. They're learning how to do Mars in this lifetime. They're learning how to balance their energy, balance their opinions, balance when and where to use that Mars.
Yeah, when to pick your battles.
When to pick their battles, and this is going to be really connected with their emotional state as well because of that moon being involved in it. And so they're here learning how to work on that, learning how to how to feel okay with it. It's good to understand, if you have a Mars moon combination in your chart, what that can feel like in your body, and how to actually energetically become more aware of it. Because like the story you were talking about, how you started feeling upset in the bedroom and you didn't know exactly what was triggering you, that could be a real Mars moon, not in, like you were talking about. It could pop up out of nowhere and you just don't understand how quickly it can rise.
Yeah, I notice that when transits are going, when Mars is transiting over my moon or opposing my moon, boy, oh boy, is the anger come really quickly. And especially if you have, many planets in your chart ruled by Mars. It's just part of your nature. And it's great in some situations, like work, for instance. It can be good depending on what it is you're doing. Usually not if you're like working with people directly. But in relationships, it can be terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see that this person is really in a place to actually maybe work on some of these internal things in their life, because the planet Uranus just went over their moon as it was moving out of Aries, and it's going to go backwards into Aries as it retrogrades, and it's going to hit the moon again. And that Uranus moon can really trigger a deeper understanding, a more interest in understanding how to go deeper into that moon, into the emotions and into the intuition, and understand this whole lineup that's going on. And as well as that transit, the planet Jupiter will be moving into their first house when it moves into Sagittarius. So this is a really good time for this person. This person is going to be able to get a lot of information from working on these things. Whatever this person does right now towards balancing some of these aspects in their chart is going to go a long way. So
yeah, that's true. And I see too that this person is a visionary.
Yeah.
Someone who can really see down the line, see what's coming, and future technologies. And this is a talent that can really be developed for the benefit of all of mankind, actually. and for the person and personally too. So, you know, everything in astrology is both good and bad, always depending on the context. Always.
Right.
Right? You know, so you can, and just remember that too. And even when you hear words like malefic, like, it doesn't mean, it just means that in some situations, that planet will cause pain. In other situations, it's exactly what you must have, that you need. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, Mars.
Yeah. I mean, if you are meant to climb the mountain and get to the top and win the $1 million when you get there, you know, Mars and Saturn come in really handy in pushing us and, you know, creating that element of stress to push us to achieve things in our life. And the benefic planets, Jupiter and Venus, while they can be really comforting and bring a lot of wonderful things into our lives, they also can have us sit on the couch and eat bonbons all day if they're out of balance. So both of those planets are going to create good and bad experiences for us, or I don't want to say good and bad, maybe enjoyable and less enjoyable experiences for us, and they're going to do it in different ways. So the malefic planets tend to do it more with pressure and stress and hard work. The benefic planets tend to do it with more ease. But the goal and the final outcome turns out the same either way. So.
She's in the moon time period too. She's in moon Rahu.
Yeah, I saw that. And she's
so that's what you were thinking when you said, boy, this is a good time for this?
Yeah, that moon is going to get stimulated by that Uranus transit, and you know, that moon is her 8th house lord. It's not her 8th cusp lord, but it is her 8th house lord.
Yeah.
And that can open up a lot around her intuition, her psychic abilities, her interest in astrology, and also deeper fundamental healing. Just in general, the 8th house has a lot to do with our psychology and how we're feeling, our insecurities. That's the 4th house too, so it looks good with Jupiter and Mercury being there in the 4th house, and this 8th house lord getting triggered by something like Uranus can really open that up.
Yes, and you know what else is happening is Jupiter is a manifestor planet, and he's transiting in Scorpio and aspecting the moon and the 8th and the 2nd house of self-worth.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff is getting manifested too, helping to manifest.
Yep. And Mercury has been over there in Leo aspecting that 5th house too. The 5th house is also spiritual practices. So the 5th house can have a lot to do with meditation. It can also have a lot to do with just understanding more knowledge, and especially spiritual knowledge, and past life practices may come back that we've practiced in this life, getting connected with them. So this looks like a great transit, and our subject matter might be right up this person's alley of understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, then Rahu has been going back and forth in Leo too, and this is the 9th by sign and 8th by cusp. So lots and lots of epiphanies.
Yep.
This is good. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Unfortunately, because we have so many charts, we really can't do like an exhaustive reading. And there's a lot more, way more to say.
So did we decide?
You know what? We didn't figure out the attachment style though.
Right. And it would be interesting for people we're doing their charts to be able to take the test and tell us what it is that their attachment style is in this lifetime. And you know, I'm going to say there's definitely a mix of things going on in here, because we've got the Venus and Saturn, which could create more of the anxious attachment style.
And so could Moon Rahu.
So could Moon Rahu, but it could also possibly aspect and become more an avoidant for a while. It might, like, this person looks like they might be changing in their life to a certain degree, because that moon is with Rahu and they're still developing kind of what the Mars and moon are about in this life.
Right, and Saturn is a delaying factor anyway. When he's with Venus, he's going to slow the whole Venus thing down, which is relationship stuff. And everything with Saturn, though, gets better over time. So that's a good thing to know, because he represents maturity and time. So, when Saturn's with Venus, he tends to slow down Venus things.